Welcome back to another episode of Cyclone InCYders. Matt Van Winkle, joined once again by Sam Turner, who's going to help us talk a little bit about some Iowa State football. We're also going to touch on some Iowa State volleyball coming up in the third segment with our Cyclone InCYder, Andrew Schneider. But Sam, yikes. We got to talk about this game. I know it's going to be tough, but Iowa State versus Texas Tech last weekend. Really a stalemate first half, pretty evenly matched between the Iowa State offense and defense, but really that second half, Iowa State just fell apart. Steele Jantz really was the story of the day. A lot of mistakes out of him. A lot of people, not really happy with Steele Jantz right now, and rightfully so. Similar situation to what we saw last year with him. Played pretty well for those first three games. I guess with that Connecticut game being the exception there, but really Steele Jantz struggling in this game, and that was really the headline of the night.
It really was, because in all honesty, the defense played very well. They gave up a decent amount of yards through the air to Texas Tech, Seth Dagey. But you're going to do that when you play Texas Tech, the way they spread the field out. But the offense was absolutely anemic. They couldn't get anything going on. Jantz, in the first half, had 3 passing yards. 3 passing yards, that's it. Finished with, 73 passing yards. 3 interceptions. I mean, it was just a terrible performance.
Yeah, the first 4 possessions of the game resulted in 3 and outs and punts. Or possession were punts. I don't know necessarily 3 and outs, but for Iowa State, their first 2 possessions were 3 and outs, so that just kind of shows you how they got started off. And we know that Iowa State in the past has really started off well in that first quarter. Against Tulsa, they go out there and they scored 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. Against Iowa, they looked good in that first drive. In Western Illinois, they looked good as well. So when Iowa State doesn't produce in the first quarter, you know that it's going to go downhill from there. The one big scoring play, though, did come on an A.J. Klein pick 6, which he returned to the house. His 4th of his career at Iowa State, which set a record for Iowa State in scoring defense. So kind of a cool stat there by A.J. Klein. But really that's about it from what we saw from Iowa State yesterday. We saw Edwin Arceo struggle again. We saw him miss a field goal and an extra point. So the kicking struggles continue again for Iowa State. But as we got into that, after the first half, 7-7, you thought, okay, there was really no momentum for either team at that point in the game. You thought Iowa State might have a little bit of an advantage just because of that touchdown by Klein, but that's about it. And as we headed into the second half, more struggles from Steele Jantz. The picks continued, the fumbles continued, 3 interceptions and a fumble from Steele Jantz.
Well, it was disappointing because they're in the first drive of the second half. They scored a touchdown. It looked like they got it figured out there in the locker room, whatever Rhodes said. They had it figured out, but once again, just weren't able to produce whatsoever. The turnovers obviously killed the offensive production, and it was just more of the same in the second half.
Yeah, and I thought that right after Iowa State scored that touchdown, that really it was a momentum changer, I thought, at that point in the third quarter. And then Arceo misses the extra point. And I thought, man, the kicking struggles again continue. And I thought that if Iowa State could build on that, keep something going, no, it didn't happen. Steele Jantz goes out there again, another 3 and out, and an interception by Steele Jantz. Man, it was tough to watch out there just because they had so many chances to get down there. The defense kept keeping them in games, we saw Jacques Washington, interception in the first half, then Steele goes out there and makes a turnover. It's those kind of things that kill you, and you can't be doing that, especially in the Big 12, when you need points, Sam. You need every opportunity you can get. You need your quarterback to make you a play, and Steele Jantz has been able to make plays for Iowa State. We've seen him been able to do that, but, man, just nothing happened. Nothing happening against Texas Tech.
No, it was terrible, and we do need to give credit to Texas Tech because they are a good team, still undefeated. Coming into this game, you weren't entirely sure what to expect from them because they had played pretty much nobody, but they really came out, played well. The defense played well. They dominated Iowa State there at both of the lines, and it really started there for Iowa State. I mean, that was just the beginning of a long day, getting dominated up front there on offense and defense.
I want to pick your brain on this, Sam, a little bit. What do you think happened to Steele Jantz last night? Do you think that it was the O-line that was not giving him a lot of protection? Do you think it was him just making poor decisions? What do you think it was? I know in that one fumble he had, tried to create some space, extend the play a little bit, and let the ball get loose. Do you think it was just poor decision-making on Steele's part, or do you think it was a little bit of both, the line and him?
Well, I think it was 2 things. I think he was reverting back to his old habits when he wasn't seeing success, trying to force things that, frankly, weren't there, just not taking care of the ball. But also, Texas Tech came with a great game plan Paul Rhodes talked about this in the post-game press conference. They really pressed the receivers at the line of scrimmage, and everybody knows Iowa State's offense is predicated off those quick passes right away. And when the cornerbacks are pressing the receivers, those passes aren't going to be there. And also having that young, inexperienced offensive coordinator there, he just wasn't really switching up the game plan at all. When that stuff wasn't working, he tried to force the running game. And in the situation where the cornerbacks are pressing, you want to go over the top, take some shots there to make those corners back off. But those chances weren't successful either. Jance was not making good throws, and it just wasn't there all night for Iowa State.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the pressure definitely was there on the receivers. They talked about that. Ernst Brunn said they were playing a lot of man-to-man, which they weren't expecting. They were kind of switching things up. Texas Tech just seemed to be the better team defensively later on in the game. Iowa State defense, got to give them a lot of credit, though. They did keep Iowa State in this game up until really the final quarter. Iowa State had a chance to score late in the game, and then Steele does have that fumble. But I want to ask you another thing, Sam, is that with this 3-0 start Iowa State has had and the way Steele's performed so far, a lot of people kind of ignoring the fact that he's really hasn't been playing up to his potential, and he hasn't really been playing that well. You know, look at the Tulsa game, starts off with a big win, plays pretty well. We saw his completion percentage is definitely up this year, right about 67%, which is pretty good. I mean, but then you look at the turnovers. He's got 7 interceptions and I think 3 or 4 fumbles as well. 10 turnovers in 4 games, Sam. That's just not getting it done. Do you think, though, that people had been ignoring the fact that Steele had those interceptions and turnovers based on the fact that Iowa State was 3-0?
Simple answer, yes, they were, because at the end of the day, if you get the victory, you tend to overlook the bad parts about it. And like you said, 7 interceptions, 7 touchdowns, another 3 or 4 fumbles to go on top of that. In actuality, Steele Jance really has not played that well. Tulsa and the wins against Tulsa and Western Illinois, they were big victories. But then against Iowa, I mean, he almost lost Iowa State the game in that ball game. Multiple turnovers there in the red zone, and he just keeps giving away the ball in very inopportune times for the Cyclones, and that's killing them. They're lucky that they've only lost 1 game up to this point.
Biggest question moving forward from this game for me is, how does Iowa State go on the road now? We're going to talk about this a little bit in our next segment, but quickly, Sam, how does Iowa State move past this and play a ranked 15th ranked Texas Christian University team next week? How do they move past this?
The fans are obviously really scratching their head, and they're not very optimistic right now, but everybody has to remember that Paul Rhodes never loses control of his team. And year after year, he's shown that after tough losses, the team normally bounces back. And that big win against Texas in 2010 was after they got shellacked against Oklahoma the week before, 52-0. So Paul Rhodes is the type of coach that is never going to lose his team. The team will bounce back. They will be ready to go through this gauntlet of a schedule.
Yeah, and let's not forget, last season Iowa State starts 3-0, then they lose 3 straight games and just look terrible. Go down to play Texas Tech, and they play one of their best games of the year offensively. So I think they just need to find that consistency, find that rhythm, keep their composure, and I think that when Iowa State's playing at their best defensively and offensively, they're a great team. They can be really dangerous. And if Steele Jance eliminates those turnovers, the defense plays as well as they did against Texas Tech yesterday, I think that they can beat a good TCU football team, a 4-0 team that Iowa State's got to go on the road and play better. Coming up after the break, Sam and I are going to break down next week's TCU game. You won't want to miss it. You're watching Cyclone InCYders.
More games are lost than are won. And we showed that tonight. 2 fantastic defensive efforts by our kids and the Texas Tech defense. A lot of credit to them. To win in the Big Ten, you got to persevere. You got to be prepared to play all 60 minutes. They got that done better than we did tonight. Steele Jance is not the one to blame for this single loss. Obviously, Steele Jance contributed to it. But we don't need to jump on that wagon right now and start beating him.
73 yards, 4 turnovers. How much faith do you have?
Well, he's capable of making plays. If I didn't, I wouldn't put him back on the field after the last fumble. The guy's got talent. He's used poor judgment too much, and he's made certainly a number of negative plays that have hurt our football team. He's got to improve. Does that mean we'll challenge him to see who practices better? Probably so. As I've always said, you got to keep competing at every position on any football team, and quarterback's no different. When you're playing a number of snaps, advantage goes to the offense and the conditioning factor, because especially in offenses like this, because their skills, their playmakers are coming on and off the field, and your defensive 11 are staying out there for every snap, mentally and physically having to react fast and get ready for the next play. And as the game wore along, I wouldn't say freshness, but the ability to make some plays in space and create some yardage, they did. Credit to them. They got good skill players. There were a lot of things that weren't pretty. I don't think we ever established control of the line of scrimmage. I don't think we knocked people off the ball very well and gave us a clean attack as far as running the football. Very, very little success on first down to put us in manageable situations or non-predictable situations. There'll be a lot of film study and looking back in the last 2 weeks of our preparation and analyzation taking place. They were pressing all over the field, and when guys are rolled up on your widest receivers and then on the inside receivers, that's not part of the package. It's just not there. Why that is successful with a lot of people is folks are loose. They play off of those offensive players, and you can throw and catch and get blocks made to start plays. You can't do that against that kind of press coverage.
I mean, the defense played great. You know, we prepare for opportunities like this. This is the Big 12. If you got a chance to watch that West Virginia-Baylor game, you know the Big 12 can score points. You know, we can put points on the scoreboard. And I thought we did a great job of limiting Texas Tech to, was it 21 points, 24? You know, hey, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that. I'm not going to break my arm, though. I'm going to get ready for TCU. So,
honestly, I don't know. We just didn't click, as you can see all night. I guess we was getting different looks than we've seen on film. They changed their defense up a lot. They didn't play as much zone as we thought they were going to play. They played a lot of man, and they brought a lot of blitzes, which they didn't show in the first 3 games. So I think we were a little shocked, and but we have to do better than that.
The running game, it's real important. It pretty much set up the passing game. If you're running good, they make the team, want to blitz more, or, load the box and stuff like that, and then boom, there you go. They go deep pass, touchdown. So, run game pretty much helped the passing game.
Got to get better from last week. There's a couple mistakes that we had on the field, but it's just playing hard and, watching film on our next opponent and forgetting about the last game and moving forward.
What kind of leader is Jacquez? How is he kind of involved and what kind of tone setter is he for you guys?
He involved in everything. He's a safety. He makes all the checks and the calls and motion and all types of everything. He basically the quarterback of the defense back there. He makes the checks to, like I said, the motions and everything, and he basically a vocal guy that just talks to everybody.
Welcome back to Cyclone InCYders. Matt Van Winkle and Sam Turner here. Going to do a little preview of the TCU game coming up on Saturday down in Fort Worth. Sam, TCU, a good 4-0 team. Really haven't played anybody, though. They did that second week of the season. They did play a Big 12 team in Kansas, but as we know, Kansas is kind of the bottom dweller of the Big 12 this year, so really not a lot of strength of schedule for TCU. Had a big win against Grambling State to start off the year, 56-0. Kansas 20-6, 27-7 against Virginia, and Southern Methodist 24-16 last week. Their defense looks really good. They have allowed the second fewest points in the nation right now. So is this TCU team legit, or do you think they might be a little bit overrated, Sam?
I think from what we've seen of them so far, that's going to kind of be their game plan all season long. TCU is historically a team, especially under Gary Patterson, led by their defense. They're always good on defense every single year. And it looks like based off of their offensive struggles, their defense is really going to lead this team so far this season. They've done a great job so far and will probably continue to do that into the Big 12 play, but it's going to be a lot tougher against those Big 12 offenses.
First time these teams will be playing each other as members of the Big 12. Going to be an interesting game because Iowa State coming off this game against Tech, a game in which they really looked at their worst so far this season. I would argue maybe even the worst out of last season, too. I just thought maybe just offensively, I thought they played pretty poorly. But as we said in the last segment, they played a good defensive game. But the quarterback spot is the hot tea right now. And in my opinion, I think that Steele Jantz will be the starter next week. I think that he should be the starter going forward. I think, this is one game. Can't look too much into it. And obviously, Rhodes is going to assess the film. He said that in the postgame yesterday. He's going to assess the film, look at how Steele played. But Sam, who do you think should be the starter next week? Is it going to be Jared Barnett or Steele Jantz?
I think they've got to stick with Steele Jantz. I think it would be a huge mistake to switch over to Barnett this early. It would really show that Coach Rhodes and the offensive staff have no faith in Jantz if they were to switch over to Barnett this quickly. It was just an awful game for Jantz this week against Texas Tech. But you got to stick with them. You got to switch up the offensive game plan a little bit. A lot of it fell on the shoulders of Courtney Messingham as well. He really was forcing his game plan against Texas Tech. Needs to try to switch things up a little bit. Just have to make things easier on Jantz because he's one of those quarterbacks who, if he gets in a rhythm, he's going to be successful. But if he's never in a rhythm, always running for his life, he's just never going to produce, and that's not much different than any quarterback.
And I thought that Iowa State really did try to run the ball a lot yesterday and against Texas Tech, and I think that they need to get a little bit more consistency between the passing game and on the ground. But Steele Jantz really needs to become better at limiting the turnovers, and I think that's going to be crucial. As we saw those numbers that TCU defense has been putting up, they're really going to be put to the test, Sam. And I think that Iowa State, if they go out there, as I said, score early and often, they're going to have a better shot to win this game. And I really think that they're going to need to have a solid running game too. I think that if like what we saw against Tulsa, we saw James White and Chantrell both have good games, and that really took a lot of the pressure off Steele throwing the ball. He looked pretty good. He didn't have to I think he threw for maybe 40, 50 passes that game, but the offense was clicking. It seemed like they were a lot more comfortable out there. I thought they didn't look comfortable last week, and I think so that if they're comfortable out there and they feel like they can score, they just got to have that motivation to go out there. I think they're going to be set.
There definitely has to be good balance offensively there for the Cyclones because you see Steele Jantz struggle there on offense through the air. That's the situation where you got to start to run the ball and mix things up a little bit because obviously the way Steele Jantz turns the ball over, you can't rely on him the entire game to produce, and you have to rely on that balance and just say, Steele, manage this game. Don't turn the ball over. Keep us in this game because the way the defense plays, they can get it done. They can score themselves. You saw it against Texas Tech. So it's just got to be a matter of Steele Jantz limiting his mistakes and Iowa State being able to run the ball a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, a couple good rushers for Texas TCU as we look at their stats. Matthew Tucker's got 52 carries for over 200 yards and a touchdown. And Waymon James has also got, I think his average is almost 10 yards a carry. So he's got 17 carries for 168 yards and a touchdown. So it looks like they're going to try to mix those guys a little bit. Might be kind of a situation like a Jeff Woody where he just goes out there and pounds the ball. Not really sure. I haven't looked at much of their tape, much of their games, but as we look at their numbers, I mean, these guys are putting up good offensive numbers. They're not, going out there and scoring 1-2 touchdowns. They're getting 3, 4, 5, scoring 56 points each game in their opener. So these guys can score defensively, as we've said, second best scoring defense in the nation right now, and probably the best in the Big 12 as well right now. So these guys are going to be good. They've got a couple good receivers, Brandon Carter and Josh Boyce. A couple of guys that have got 3, 4 touchdowns apiece. So, they've got that mix. Looks like they go to the air more than the ground for scoring, but, it's going to be an even mix too. It's at TCU. It's going to be a tough game. Quick thoughts on your predictions, Sam, about this game coming up Saturday?
Well, it's honestly kind of up in the air because you never really know, coming off such a terrible loss there for Iowa State, how they're going to respond, especially coming into Fort Worth, facing TCU for the first time as conference foes, especially the way TCU plays defense. You're not really sure how the Cyclones are going to come out, but I would expect Paul Rose to rally the team like he always does. TCU isn't a team that's going to put up big offensive numbers, so as long as Steele Jantz is able to limit his mistakes in this game, Iowa State can be right in this one.
What do you think? Win or loss, though? I want to get your thoughts because coming off this game especially, for me personally, I'm going to pick against Iowa State in this one, but I want to get your quick, do you have a score? Do you have a team you're going to pick in this game?
I think this is going to be a low-scoring ball game. I think TCU ends up winning the ball game based off of Iowa State's mistakes. Their defense is just too good, and as long as TCU doesn't commit their own mistakes, they should be able to pull off the victory.
Yeah, I've got TCU in this one as well. This is the first time all season I've picked against Iowa State. I'm not being a homer or anything, but in the past. But I really think that Iowa State, based on what I saw against Texas Tech, that they don't have what it takes right now to go beat a 15th ranked team on the road. They had a chance last week to be, to start 4-0, become ranked probably, and they just couldn't get it done. And I think that at home they had a really good chance, and going on the road in a tough environment at TCU, it's going to be especially tough to win down there. I've got TCU 28-14. I think you're right. It's going to be a low-scoring game. I think Iowa State might get on the board once or twice, but yeah, based on what I saw from Iowa State's offense last week, I think they're not gonna come through, and I think the defense will probably allow a couple of touchdowns here and there, but they'll keep Iowa State in the game. I think TCU runs away with it 28-14. So Sam's got TCU. I've got TCU. We'll see. It's going to be at 2:30 on Saturday down in Fort Worth, Texas. TCU versus Iowa State. Coming up next, we're going to be joined by Andrew Schneider to talk a little bit of Iowa State volleyball. You're watching Cyclone InCYders.
It's been a roller coaster season so far for the Iowa State volleyball team, but there's one thing that hasn't changed: the play of junior libero Kristen Hahn. Hahn leads the Big 12, averaging over 6 digs per set. The Cedar Rapids native earned her 3rd straight Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week award, her 7th defensive award of her career. Hahn says more focus is what's helped her this season.
That the Big 12 is really tough, and just to never take a team for granted and always come in and work my hardest. And I've just been listening to the coaches and what they're asking of me, scouting teams, where I need to be defensively, and things have just been falling into place.
Volleyball head coach Christy Johnson-Lynch agrees that Hahn is one of the most focused players on the team.
Just in her body language, the way she comes to practice, the way she stands in huddles, the way she listens to directions, and instructions for drills. She's very, very focused, and that carries over to the matches. She knows where to be every play, and that can be hard, and you might think, well, you're an athlete, that's a given, but it's very hard to just be that alert and focused and determined that every play. Some players kind of go in and out. She seems to be in it every single play.
Senior middle blocker Jamie Straube says hard work has paid off for Hahn this year.
I think that her attitude that she brings into practice in every game just transfers to the rest of us. So I think, just having that and having someone who is always talking and always just, you can trust her to just give her all. Having her back there just gives everyone else a lot of motivation to work hard.
Hahn and the Cyclones head to Manhattan, Kansas on Wednesday for a match with 15th ranked Kansas State. For ISU TV Sports, I'm Matt Van Winkle.
Welcome back to our third and final segment of Cyclone InCYders. Andrew Schneider joining us now, replacing Sam Turner, of course. Andrew's our volleyball insider, and Andrew, the volleyball team coming off a 1-1 week, a week in which they went down to Lawrence, Kansas, and lost to Kansas, a team that was 13-2 going into that game, a team that Iowa State was really expected to beat, fell down there, come back up and play TCU, another good team, on Saturday, and got a win, and a nice win for them too.
And another week, just consistency's been a problem. And Christy said it again after yesterday's game. It's been up and down all week. It's 1 week it's the back row, and really that's kind of surprising given that Hockaday and Hahn are two of the best defensive players in the country. And then against Kansas, it was the middle. Jamie Straube had another down game. Then she comes back big and huge this weekend, really leads the Cyclones to victory. And it's a matter of this consistency. The talent is there. This team is possibly the most talented team in the Big 12 this year.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. The freshmen have been huge, making huge contributions. Mackenzie Bigby had another big week. But really, it's just an issue of those senior leaders aren't playing consistent volleyball match after match.
And I think that's the big thing, too, is as we said, Iowa State goes down to Kansas, and it took them 5 sets. It went all the way down to 5 sets, but Iowa State was down 0-2. And I think that shows a lot of courage for them to come back and make it a 5-set match, and they won those next 2, ended up not being able to pull off that 5th set. But I think that speaks a lot to how they were improving, even in that match alone, being able to come back from that. And I think they learned a lot about themselves, too, is that they know that they've got what it takes to get to the 5th set, even when they're down 0-2. And I think that senior leadership is huge. And as you said, Jamie Straube did not have a good match against Kansas. Comes in against TCU, has one of her probably better matches of this month, I would say, one of the best matches maybe of the season for her, and really led the team in kills and was just a huge part of that game.
Oh, and yeah, she was, and she's the key to this team. If Jamie Straube goes, this team can beat anyone in the country, as proven against Nebraska. The problem is that sometimes she's just been a little uneven, and not to her fault necessarily. There's a lot of new players around her. There's a lot of freshmen out there, and there's been some communication issues that have cropped up every now and then. An issue that they thought they resolved by that Nebraska game. I mean, you got Hudson, who's playing more than ever in the back row, and she's doing a fantastic job half the time, but once again, she's a little inconsistent as well. And the only real consistent player for this team all season has been Kristen Hahn, who's posting 30 dig matches after 30 dig matches, where she is making some fantastic plays in that back row, really saving the Cyclones from possibly losing in Kansas in less than 5 sets, and really a big factor this week against TCU.
And I think another name you can throw in there is Allison Landwehr, who's also been very consistent there as the team's the setter for the team, setting the team up for those big kills. But if the girls aren't there for the kills, they've had girls like Mackenzie Bigby, Victoria Hurt step in and really do nice jobs. But it's to beat teams in the Big 12, you've got to be well-rounded. You've got to be good defensively, as you said, in the back row and front row. And that's something that they've been lacking. And they really, I think you said the word consistency is something that they really need to keep improving.
Well, I think against TCU, you just mentioned how Allison has been setting, and she has these players that aren't there. We saw it a couple times even against TCU in a match where the Cyclones more or less dominated the entire match, where there'd be a couple sets where Allison would bring it up, and then there'd be no one there to swing at it or run up against the net. And really, for players like Hockaday hasn't played front row for a couple years, so I think she's still trying to find her groove, although she's at times looked really good, and she has very good control when she goes up and swings. Very directional swinger, maybe not a strong swinger. And then Victoria Hurt at times is trying to swing off her back foot too much, and Mackenzie Bigby swings sometimes into a double block, and like you said also, just a little bit out of position on offense for those outside hitters. But I don't think it's a big problem because the talent is clearly there. These outside hitters might be the best bunch if they're able to figure it out in the country.
And Iowa State did lose a lot of seniors last year, so maybe it's a fact of just being experience out there. As you said, Hockaday, she's one of those hitters where she can go out there and see a hole and just kill it right there. And I think girls like Bigby just try to hit the ball really hard, just try to get that powerful kill. But I think that maybe experience is what's hurting Iowa State right now in that consistency. But I think that, as we keep going forward, they've got a big match against Kansas State coming up, which we'll get to in a sec. But I think that moving forward in the Big 12, if they want a chance to win the Big 12, trying to beat teams like Texas, who's the favorite to win the conference right now, they need to get these big wins against Kansas, and especially on the road, they need to pick up these wins.
Well, and the way they're going to do that is they got to find a go-to. And really, I think Carly Jensen was in attendance at TCU this Saturday, and it was there's been players that have stepped up in her absence since she's graduated at times. There hasn't been true consistency with these players. We thought it was Bigby early. Then she had a couple down matches where teams were defending her. She's picked it up again as of late, swinging a lot better, swinging a lot harder with more confidence, if you will. It's just they haven't had that go-to player where time and time again they can count on a kill. It's been at times Hockaday, at times it's been Straube, at times it's been Matlock, and at times it's been Hurt and Bigby. But the problem is that at one match, it'll be that one player, the next it won't. So Allison's got to try and find a way to set to someone who she can count on, and sometimes if they're not even there at the end of the set, that's been really losing them these big rallies that they used to have last year that really carried them through the postseason. And that's going to be the key against a team like Kansas State, is finding a go-to who's going to be able to go through some really tough blocks. Kansas State's one of the top teams in the country, kind of out of nowhere, had a really big preseason. And that's just going to be the big key. And not to sound like a big downer on this volleyball team, they're still in great shape. That loss against Kansas really hurts in the Big 12, but I think
it's early.
It's very early in the season, and a win against Texas and a win against Kansas State this week will go a long way to getting that goal of the Big 12 championship.
We'll see if that consistency can continue with Iowa State on the road as they take on Kansas State this week. Come back next week for another episode of Cyclone InCYders. We want to thank Andrew Schneider and Sam Turner earlier for joining us. You've been watching Cyclone InCYders.